broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by theunshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everyone and welcome to the midweek edition of WilmsFront. The date is Wednesday the 8th of July 2020. It is 6:45 p.m. here in Melbourne, which means it's 4 hours and 15 minutes until Greater Melbourne goes back into stage 3 lockdown for 6 weeks. Victorians are now cut off from the rest of Australia, with New South Wales having closed its border to Victoria due to this second wave, as it's been increasingly called. This second lockdown in Victoria follows the last week's lockdown of northwestern Melbourne postcodes due to those multi-ethnic areas of the city becoming hotspots for new coronavirus cases, with several clusters. Victoria has become the laughingstock and pariah of the rest of Australia. The other states and territories are continuing to ease their restrictions and economic reopening their economies more. Meanwhile, here in Victoria, cafes, restaurants, pubs, cinemas, gyms and beauty salons who had just reopened in Victoria will have to close. Community sport has ended and the AFL players have fled the state, with the remainder of the season to be played outside of Victoria. And there is a lot more resentment and anger as this second lockdown looms, mainly because Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews, he blamed families, young people, complacency, basically any Victorian other than himself and his government. He's danced the question of his government's decision to use private security contractors to manage Victoria's returned hotel traveller quarantine program, and also he's turning a blind eye to the local Black Lives Matter protests last month and other leftist rallies that has led to hundreds of daily new coronavirus cases now. It has been revealed with the hotel quarantine that guards, they received little to no COVID-safe training. They even slept with hotel quarantinis and even let them out to go shopping. Yet Andrews and his government, they still continue to have the nerve to conduct themselves in an arrogant and dictatorial style, continuing to treat us like children, wagging their fingers at us and already out threatening us with fines and sending out police checkpoint Charlies like they did during the first draconian lockdown, which has proved to not work, and the state reopening has proven to not be the cause of this second wave. Nobody was more alarmed at the state government's continued totalitarian approach than the residents of 9 public housing towers in Melbourne, many of them migrants who continue to be under total house arrest. They have been since Saturday afternoon, not allowed to leave their flats at all, not even for the 4 reasons allowed under stage 3. One of the areas of multi-ethnic Melbourne, which was originally designated as a coronavirus hotspot, was the City of Casey in Melbourne's outer southeast, right next to my local government area of Frankston. Sadly, during this time, City of Casey residents are without elected local representations after former Local Government Minister Adem Somyurek MP dismissed the council in February due to governance issues. Tonight, returning to WilmsFront is Rosalie Crestani, formerly City of Casey Councillor, but is still a pillar of the local community and is lucky to join me now. Rosalie, good evening.
Good evening, Tim. Thanks for having me.
And I noticed that you're outside of the City of Casey building in Narre Warren. Just outside of Fountain Gate.
Angel Place.
So
that's right.
May have taken away your access card, but that hasn't stopped you connecting with the community.
That's exactly right. I'm still proud to be part of the community, and look, I do miss being a representative so dearly, and I know there's residents out there that miss having the representation, and it has been quite a sad time, but look, I'm still here, I'm still around the area, and still listening to what people are saying, and look forward to the day where I can be your representatives again.
And you're also a small businesswoman, because we'll get into local government operations later, but all councillors are part-time. You still had your day job. So obviously it's been incredibly tough for all businesses, not just the ones that have had to close.
That's right. And my heart really goes out to particularly small businesses and those who really rely on their income from the small business to feed their family, to clothe their family, to keep them in school. And look, I know that there's so many people struggling out there. I've myself, with my own little business, definitely seen a decline. I've had to go and get some other work, which has been good. I've been blessed to have another job. But yeah, definitely I can understand what people are going through. There's been times where I haven't been without the job situation as well. So I do understand, and I just look forward to the day where we can build a stronger economy again without some of these draconian laws and dictatorship that we've been under. And look, I hope that I can still do what I can to foster that sort of environment anyway. I'm really big on local produce, local manufacturing. So I think if we put our heads together, we can produce local products that I know the public are going to buy, because there's been a bit of disillusionment about overseas sources. And I certainly think that we can help each other through this as well.
I noticed that the media, mainstream media, is back to full hysteria mode about the second wave. I just call it that because it's basically a way to summarize it, and that's what the figures point to. We've seen. I'll just bring it up here. The coronavirus curve here. From the Australian Government Department of Health. You can see where it peaked back in late March, went right down, but you can see it really starting to rise now, thanks to Victoria. But we still only have 10 people in ICU. That's gone up. So clearly hospitals are not swamped. 39%, 39 people in hospital. And we have a national test positive rate to coronavirus tests, if you believe they're accurate, of 0.3%. Yet I think we're all feeling we're sick of these restrictions, and none of us are looking forward to, in Greater Melbourne, another 6 weeks of lockdown. I woke up this morning feeling like absolute rubbish and I think a lot of people were feeling the same, and it's even hard to broadcast tonight knowing the 6 weeks ahead of us. Yes. Because it was already so hard the first time, and yes. I think you can only put people through this once and ruin an economy once.
That's right.
The second time, I don't blame anyone who's burst into tears today. It's because even though I'll get through it okay, I still empathize with all those sorts of people, and you would have had conversations with them as well.
Absolutely. And my own daughter cries about this. It's devastating. Look, it's my last night out too, because I wouldn't be able to do this in 24 hours without getting arrested or fined. So it's devastating what's going on. You know, we're used to a flu season. We have people die every year, and the charts for the flu cases, you're talking in the tens of thousands every year across Australia. So we're not adverse to knowing what it's like to go through a season. I just think it's an overreach, and I think that people can be trusted. They've got a few targeted cases. They know there's a super spreader out there, so they should chase that super spreader down. But I think that most people are so tired of it. I think they endured it for the first time, but I don't think that they're going to be wanting this again. I think this is a countdown to the days of Daniel Andrews' leadership. I'm sorry to say. Well, actually, I'm not. He he has misgoverned, poorly governed this whole situation, as well as I think the communist way is to dictate, micromanage people's lives and how they live, and he's actually been put to the test and unfortunately has failed.
And if you don't just I find it difficult to view and listen to his press conference now, given, as I mentioned, the nanning principle-like way he talks to us all. And I'm sick of him saying things like, "Oh, this is not over. I know a lot of people would like this to be over, but it's not." And I mentioned the total deflection that he continues to make, and he's like, "I think we all know somebody who hasn't done the right thing. I'm asking Victorians to help us. We can't do this alone." And then when he announced last week the postcode lockdown, he's like, I might have to shut down all postcodes now. He was back to that style, and it is just so condescending. You serve us. You're not. You're not a dictator, which is why he's called Dictator Dan. You serve us. You're accountable to us. I didn't put him in here, but the voters at the 2018 Victorian state election did. I think a bit more, I would say, transparency, a bit more humbleness, and just acknowledging a lot of people talk about the best apologetic leader was Peter Beattie, who'd confessed when he stuffed up and said, "I'll fix it, I'll do better next time."
I think people do appreciate humility from a leader, because people are still human at the end of the day, and these decisions they make affect thousands, millions of lives. I mean, 5 million people in Victoria. I just think he's a big deflector. I'm sorry, but he is. If you ask him a tough question, he doesn't want to talk about that now. Let's talk about this. And what about Cedar Meats? Weren't they funding his campaign? But he couldn't shut them down, and they eventually spread out. There was, it shows favoritism. The branch stacking scandal has been a nice deflection. This, like you said, the Black Lives Matter rally, 30,000 people, and there's already 5. I see maybe more that those people can multiply. But why shut down church with 100 people and allow a 30,000 rally to continue? I think he has got some answering to do. Talk about inequality, the most unequal, the most condescending, mismanaged communistic government I've ever met. And it's the country of Victoria. It's not even the country of Australia. I feel like I don't belong to Australia being in this state. It's very disappointing. And it's actually a representation of just how much power that the states have. And perhaps it's time to transfer some power back to the federal government and to the councils even. Maybe we should do away with some of the state government power, I think, Tim, because he's overreached. I think he's ticked way too many people off this time. And we'll see what happens in the next little while. But I think he should exit left, as I said on my Facebook page. Exit left. It's time for him to go.
Well, I think what has really alarmed people this time, because we were what is known as level 3 lockdown during the initial lockdown, which is the 4 reasons to leave the house, which is to get essentials, exercise, work or study, or caregiving. I do a show, Trad Tasman Talk, with my New Zealand colleague, Dewey De Boer. They went to what was known as Alert Level 4, which was basically Level 3 in Victoria, except without KFC. They shut all the fast food. There was no takeaway allowed, and they put up checkpoints around a lot of the metropolitan areas, which we're sort of going to stage 3.5 now with and I deliberately call them Checkpoint Charlies on the Melbourne's boundaries here. We basically are under the dome. It's like that TV show and that Simpsons episode. Again, Simpsons
Right.
They don't predict things. They've just done every possibility, but this is tomorrow. We'll see what it looks like. And City of Casey takes in Cranbourne, Narre Warren, which is on the Princess Highway and Monash Freeway, out to Pakenham, which is in the neighbouring city of Cardinia. Pakenham is the last stop before regional Victoria. After that is Narnagoon, I think. It's going to be quite, because there would be people who are just on, who know people on the side of which is Narnagoon and Pakenham. We got a taste of this last week with the checkpoints.
Yeah, that's right. So it is quite scary, isn't it? I mean, my father endured post-World War II times. In fact, he was born in the middle of World War II. His mother understood about checkpoints. So she lived through that quite horrifically in the middle of Berlin. And
which is why I call them checkpoint Charlies deliberately.
Yeah, sorry. So I don't mean to detract there, but you know, a lot of the people living here, we've got a high migrant population. They've escaped war-torn times. They wanted to come here to live in peace, and this is what they get. No, we don't want to expose them to this. We don't want to remind them of where they've come from as far as those war situations. So yeah, you're right, Tim.
And as I mentioned in my introduction, Victoria is now sealed off from the rest of Australia, and even though regional Victoria is still at level 3 restrictions, they're actually trapped as well. They can't go into state. They can't come into metropolitan Melbourne. Victoria is actually divided now between metro and regional Victoria.
Wow, there you go. So exactly, you're exactly right. So it's even shrunk even more. And my concern is if we don't change the narrative, we don't change the situation soon, that we may never be able to travel internationally. We may be brushed with this mark forever. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not going to believe that. And I just believe we have to, get through this and change leadership and then have this managed properly and stamped out quickly. But I don't think that we're ever going to do away with the flu season. We never have and we never will. But I don't fully trust these COVID cases either, Tim, to be honest. Every time someone has a sniffle, they run off to get a test. I mean, we never did that before. And most of them are proving to be not COVID. But then some say, okay, why don't you just make it COVID so we can bolster these numbers and make it sort of give some flesh to our story. I don't fully buy it. I'm sorry. I don't think it's truly all COVID either. People die of other causes. We have a natural attrition rate and people are dying of heart failure and stuff, but they happen to be sick at the same time from an underlying, that be an underlying factor. So I just think we don't get fed the full story. So it's okay to question it, particularly when it deals with the impending push that they may try to make with us on these vaccinations to try to get vaccinated. And we may not be able to even travel without a vaccination, which we don't even know what's in them. They haven't been tested. Sorry to go off on the track, but I think there's just a reality that we have to face, that we have to stand up and say enough is enough. And when we're going to put stop guards, we're going to say no. The public has to raise up and say, no, we're not going to allow this, or else we're going to allow Dictator Dan just to roughshod over all of us continually.
I think you've answered one of my upcoming questions is, do you have the COVID Safe app?
No, I won't have it. But I have a feeling that the Apple have forced it down on any phone as part of an update. Go look, everyone. Go look in the settings, privacy, health. Go follow that link. So you look under privacy, settings, privacy, health, and you may even have it already on your phone. I broke my phone last week and I had it on my phone. I didn't even know it. And so it's turned off, but it is an identifying, if you have it or if you've been in contact, they can turn it on remotely. So have a look, Tim. Might even have it on your phone. Do you have the app?
No, of course not. That's also a silly question to ask me. But I do know people who have downloaded it, and because it uses Bluetooth, it drains the battery. And so if you're out and about, your phone's going to be dead before it can do all these digital handshakes anyway. And I've called because we've had or the figures show 6 million Australians have downloaded it, yet it hasn't traced a single coronavirus case, which I call it a Big Brother bungle.
I think so. I think so. And it just goes to show, I think those people are quite responsible not to download it, but they probably are more conscious of not catching things and that. So, yeah, that's really interesting.
And part of, I think, one of my important roles running the Unshackled is to have a very long memory and remember things that politicians said 3 months ago or events that happened a year ago. And I do not and I won't forget that Scott Morrison once said in a radio interview he wouldn't rule out making the COVID Safe app compulsory, which he came out the next day and said, "Oh no, we'd never make it compulsory." But that just gives you an insight into the mindset of even the Prime Minister at times.
Look, Prime Minister Morrison has my full support. There's those times where perhaps different policies may be something I might not support, but I think his heart is in the right place. So I can't say that about our Premier here, but I do believe that he is the right man for the hour. And I think that he's navigating the best he can. I think he should have more power to help Victoria navigate through this. Unfortunately, the way the state constitution and the federal constitution is set up, it doesn't allow for that at the moment. Maybe that's something to consider, as long as it's done without some hidden agendas that come through with it. So, yeah, I think that, look, I think he's a great leader, and I think he's got people's best interests at heart. We'll see what happens in the next while, but yes, it is.
I would agree with you on that.
This is unprecedented times, isn't it, Tim?
Overall, I'd much prefer Scott Morrison making all of the decisions for all of us than Daniel Andrews. And you rewind roughly a year ago, can you imagine the state of Australia under Bill Shorten as Prime Minister?
Oh my gosh. I'm not sure why they keep bringing him on he never polled well with the people. Why do they keep banging that drum? Look, and he can't relate to people in towers when he lives in Toorak. Sorry. Anyway, sorry. That's there's a few people that cringe when they come on TV. He's one of them. Sorry. But
well, he's I know been photographed delivering food to those locked down in the towers because it covers his electorate of Maribyrnong, which you hope he's doing it for the right reasons. But I do remember once, this was a number of years back, when he couldn't get a hot pie. He was quite abusive to an Asian shopkeeper.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. Well, it's interesting when there's election around. Will people do things like that normally, as far as go take food? No, I don't want to be too hard on the guy, but yeah, I just think about the people that daily help these people in need, and I'm talking about the Christian churches do it without making a big hoo-ha about it, without having cameras at it. So I just think there's a lot of people. Thank goodness for our volunteers out there. Casey is full of volunteers, and it's very hard because we're a bit inhibited with the movement, but there is caregiving that continues. Thank God it's not like we have to stop all caregiving or else people die everywhere, I think. But yeah, it's...
Well, you should be proud of your fellow Casey residents. I've got you just described as a Casey resident under your name, but yeah, you're definitely, as I said, one of the, as I'd call, super residents of the area.
Yeah, I've been a resident for 20 years previous to when I did move to a house on the border, so over the border. But I've been a ratepayer now for for 20 years or so, almost 20 years. But I consider myself, consider myself so much a Caseyan, but I listen every day to what's happening in Casey, to Casey residents, to the community, and my heart is with this community. I take it very seriously, my role. And I'm really sad that I had to leave, Tim.
Yeah,
because I love Casey.
And
I never missed a single meeting because I didn't want anyone hurting the people I represent. I was standing on that wall for them, and I wanted them to know that I was willing to do anything within legal means to protect them. And that's why I spoke out what I did. But I said what I did, particularly with children. I didn't expect to cry. I'm a bit of a crier, but really strong tears. And we weren't meant to talk about this till the end of the show.
No, that's okay. It's an emotional day for all of us.
I'm still very angry, and I think the Andrews government have a lot to answer for about sacking innocent people. And, you know, there is a natural justice that occurs when there is injustice that occurs. It's only a matter of time before it's exposed, and it was. And Mr. Somyurek was the first sculpt because he was the one that made the decision. And I said on the radio, I said, you better have your backyard in order. And it was not a threat. It was saying, I know if you're doing this to people without natural process, without fair process, elected people, then you better have your clean backyard. And it wasn't. In fact, I was surprised, not actually too surprised, but I was a little shocked about how deep. We're yet to hear how deep it's gone. But that's what happens when someone does that to innocent people. I sat at a Narre Warren Community Association meeting in Narre North, and I said, I'm upset because what they do to me happens to you because you're the ones that elected me and I'm your voice. And you've got 375,000 residents that have no voice. Now they can go to the administrators, but now I haven't met them, but there's a real cold hard clinical approach that is applied. What council has brought was that that real humanity approach. We were the conduit between council and the legislative aspect, but also with the community. And oftentimes it was meeting halfway, trying to find the best solution for everyone. So it only makes us all stronger, and we're going to get through this. And we're going to come back and we're going to take no prisoners, so to speak. It's only made me more fearless, Tim. It's only made me more resolved, and I'm not going to hold back anymore. So anyway, let's get
You're
on
making
with the
me
interview.
emotional now as well. Like I said, it's the day. It's like I said, a difficult day for all of us, given what we know what's coming. And
this isn't about me, to be honest. I'm just saying, Tim, we need to band together, and we need to get forward and through this. And I think we can still help each other without representation. It always helps having people there to move funds and that sort of thing. But I think we can each help our fellow neighbour, reach out to people that we know are struggling, even reach out to the people that we don't know are struggling, because you'd be surprised at just what people are going through at the moment. Just, I don't know, I wish I could give more people hugs, It's just really hard at the moment.
And that is, I would say, the worst part of this pandemic, if you want to still call it that, is that it's almost pretty much illegal to touch another human being. Daniel Andrews in his Facebook post the other day said this means no friends, no family, no hugs, no handshakes, no kisses. They're attempting to take that away from us as well.
It's really despicable just how micromanaging, just how trying to dissect someone's life. I can name a few other regimes that do that sort of thing. But I've also heard that people want to keep social distancing in public, so the drones and the Big Brother can keep an eye and actually detect people digitally their faces. I think that's an interesting aspect to that. But what about husbands and wives? They're going to go home and they're going to do their hugs anyway. So why can't they do it out in public? I mean, it's really sad. And I just want, you know what came to mind? Mother's Day. Why couldn't he drop the restrictions a day before? This is the kind of thing that he does not understand the public. He doesn't understand the mindset of Australians. He could have stopped those restrictions 12 hours before, even said, meet at lunchtime, and then people would have been happy. But he waited until Mother's Day was finished. I mean, what kind of heartless sort of person is he? 12 hours. I mean, come on. So he could have said his little micromanaging, keep your face masks on or whatever, do whatever you, but he didn't stop people from going visit their dear mothers. I'm sorry, Tim, I could just go on all night, but okay. It's like a
that's why I say never forget. And that was after the national cabinet meeting on the Friday. Or Mother's Day was before the national cabinet meeting on a Friday, the 3-step framework for a COVID safe Australia. So, and this is the bureaucratic confusing thing. We have Daniel Andrews has his lockdown stages, and then Scott Morrison has his 3 steps out. It's very yes minister confusing stuff. But I remember Daniel Andrews came out very quickly after that and said, whoa, nothing changes today. They still apply, and Victoria Police will be out enforcing it. And I didn't hear any reports of it, but that he threatened to that he'd use Victoria Police to pull people over on Mother's Day, and if they were going to visit their mum, give them a $1,652 fine.
It's there, exactly. It shows it for what it is. And, that poor girl getting a fine for a driving lesson where she would be sitting next to her mum anyway. I mean, there's just we all know the restrictions that were just too harsh. I mean, people couldn't go out camping or golfing. I mean, fishing. This is where you heal. This is where viruses don't thrive out there. In fact, I think China only recorded one open air virus transfer, which is interesting, out of the millions. So, I mean, if they understood health, I mean, my goodness, you go out and you go to a place where there's lots of space and you heal out there in the sun, and this is locking people indoors where it festers, where all the sorts of other things happen. I mean, that, like I've heard many times before, that the cure is worse than the actual, the outcome would be worse. So, yeah, this is unprecedented times, and I know Australians will emerge from this stronger, but they will know that no one will mess with them anymore. I think they're waking up to see really what the reality is. So hopefully we can still buy toilet paper after this is all over. Yeah. Interesting.
I'm not sure, because Casey was one of the initial designated hotspots, but you should still be proud of your municipality, because even though they were designated a hotspot, it's been stable, the active cases, at 19 based on today's figures, neighbouring Cardinia, because the 2 super testing centres were at Hallam, which is in Casey, and Pakenham, which is in Cardinia. Carninia's got no cases. Mornington Peninsula got no cases. Where I am, City of Frankston, 1. So the curve is flat in the city of Casey. Obviously,
excellent.
People were concerned about that, but definitely, well, that's part of multi-ethnic Melbourne. I know you like the term multi-ethnic, not multicultural, but that's going up here, City of Hume, which is Sunbury, Broadmeadows, and now look at Wyndham, which is Werribee. Look at Melton, Whittlesea, Brimbank. That just continues. Hume is now at 131, and this is I don't know if you'll have an answer for this, but why is it so? Those multi-ethnic areas up there, why is it so much worse there and not where you are in Casey?
I'll tell you, I've got one answer for you, Tim, and I know why. This is what I've got some inside knowledge, and that is because of prayer. Now, I'm part of a prayer group, and when they had the hotspot hit, there's a group of us got together, Pastor Daniel and a group of us, and we prayed and we said, we told that virus to leave Casey and Cardinia, and yes, it did. Now, I know that there's people praying and there's people doing more responsible things. I get that. But I like to think that we can pray against these sorts of things. You know, we take back the city. And those who have faith out there, I just encourage them to pray more and to, just to remember. I think a lot of people are anyway, coming back to their roots, coming back to really what matters. But absolutely, get on your knees and pray and ask God to heal this land and bring back better leaders, bring to, I think, help us emerge out of this unscathed and, as much as we can be. We may still go through some tougher times. Who knows if we're going to deal with, like what else could happen this year? It's just been one thing after another. What earthquakes we could, I hope not. I really don't, I hope that things don't happen continuously. But we're strong people, and Australians are resilient, and we just got to help each other through it. Yeah.
Well, as you know, I'm not religious myself, but what you just described as group prayer, that's also strong community as well.
Yes,
and
that's right.
I know that because as I've said repeatedly, I've spent a lot of time in the city of Casey. It was one of the strongest areas against the Safe Schools program, which is still in operation. But it just showed that people in this area, they look out for each other. They make sure what's going on in the community, and they're not going to stand for anyone running roughshod over their families or communities.
That's right. I mean, when you, like I said, when I'm dealing with the kids, there's nothing, the gloves are off. You're there to protect the children. Can I just say, it brought to mind, I actually put it in a Facebook post. I actually went to Premier Andrews to his face and told him to stop the Safe Schools program. And he just ignored me and he walked. He was talking to me beforehand, but as soon as I said that, he walked away and he turned his face away from me, not acknowledging me. That's just how he feels about it, because he is hell-bent on continue that program and the brainwashing. But I just find it interesting. It's sad, but a lot of parents have come back home to teach their children and have found just what hideous stuff has been taught to their children, and that they've been forced to teach, or they could be forced to teach. I mean, we're not talking about, we already had anti-bullying programs, but what we have now is continuing to be is this sort of brainwashing that you have to normalize behaviors that just are not part of most people's mindset. And I just encourage parents to just get more involved, and they can say no and go and say no to your principals, say no to teachers, move schools, or maybe consider homeschooling. We're forced to anyway these days anyway. So, but yeah, the Safe Schools Forum that myself and Councillor Saray and other colleagues helped establish at council, that we were able to get 200 people together and talk about the concerns of that. And so I like what Casey has achieved in so many ways. We've been a real pioneer in sounding the alarm on all these concerning issues. So, and I would hope that when it comes time, we can keep doing that. I'd certainly like to.
You mentioned that you're a member of Pastor Daninalia's church, which I've got the website out here, Reformation Harvest Fire Ministries, formerly Catch the Fire Ministries. Right. You'll be forced back to online services now, and that's been another, you'd call it basically a disturbing aspect of this lockdown, that people are prevented from fully exercising their religion. And first of all, I'll just get a comment from you. What has remote worship been like?
Yeah, so there's been at times a small group of us getting together anyway through when we're able to have the small numbers and that. So there has still been that remote Sunday morning services. I just think it's another ploy to try to keep churches from getting together and worshipping and meeting together. It's so important. The community is where people do come together and heal together and acknowledge God and what He's done for us, and praise Jesus. And so I just think it's very. I know that Pastor and Apostle Daniel Nalai, he lived in Saudi Arabia with his family, and they couldn't go and worship freely. They couldn't. They had to go in underground churches. It was illegal to do that. So I would question whether some laws are actually in people's best interest, and they're actually illegal laws, if you know what I mean. So I just think we should start challenging some of these laws. I think if you have certain processes that you've put in place to protect from transfer or whatever, you could still meet together. I mean, come on, it's possible. But I'm not going to tell anyone what to do. But I'm just, I just look forward to the day where we can get back together in a large group and worship God, and then we should be able to do that. And so, I feel for those who can't come together in a variety of community ways and craft groups and sporting. I mean, my children now can't play community sport. There's all sorts of gatherings. People find, I used to run workshops, scrapbooking workshops, right? And I found it was just an excuse for people to get together. Like, it didn't matter what you were doing so much. It was that real sharing of each other's lives and themselves and just getting through life together. I laughed and cried with these women, and this is what we're missing. And you can't really get it on digital. You can't. It's just not the same. You can't sort of give each other that squeeze around the shoulder and have a cuppa, and it's just not the same. So I look forward to that day we can. I don't want Australia to be under this burden anymore, but I certainly think people are going to emerge out of this probably with a fresh outlook and a stronger resolve, perhaps to search out those things that they should be doing with their lives. And maybe this is a wake-up call for a lot of families, for a lot of people, restock of their lives and think, what am I all doing it for? People have lost everything they've worked for in years as well. It's gone in a second because some dictator could take it all away from them. And if people want to blame the virus, they can. But this is going to be a real shift in our society. And I think there'll be some positive things come out of it for sure.
Well, you mentioned the remote learning, the homeschooling. Parents, they are forced to become more involved in their children's learning, which I don't like people being forced to do things, but I think look on the bright side that it gives parents more of an insight and into what their children are learning, and also spend more time with their children as well. Stop giving your children over to the state to raise them, because we don't just have schools doing the job of parents now. There's also the continued spread of childcare facilities, which of course have a lot of government influence as well, which means that children are away from their parents more as well. And going back to community and communities, there has been a lot of community solidarity that has emerged and come back, but there's also we've seen through the state government having the snitch hotlines, as I call it, if they believe that somebody is breaking the coronavirus restrictions. I'm not sure if you remember that Victoria had to, well, this was the few times they had to call in the Australian Defence Force to answer calls for the snitch lines. And the fact that the most insane fine issued, I heard, was 3 mates playing video games during lockdown. And I think a meme summarized this well. People who'd say, I'd never turn in Anne Frank, yet they're most likely the people ringing up the the snitch line. It gives you an insight into how these type of societies, whether they be Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union, just how they happened.
Exactly. It's sad to see that, and I just think I hope people aren't using the excuse to dob in neighbours they don't like either, or but it is quite sad to see that dobbing in, hidden Jews and that sort of thing. It can bring out the worst in people, but I think overall Aussies, they just want to get out of this. Most people aren't vindictive, and they aren't wanting to dob in. Most Aussies just want to get on with their lives. They want to live peacefully. They want to go work and play and go about their business and be with their families and their pastimes. And I don't want to see us descend into some sort of strict regime where it's just turning us all against each other. I think that's what communism does to people. I've got 3 Romanian friends. They actually lived under a communist regime. One of their siblings was pulled out in front of class every day and mocked for being a Christian. And so they understand, they saw how communism favoured some and not others, even though it's supposed to be so-called equal. They saw how it favoured, it sort of looked after this sort of part of this group, and they said they're so glad to be in Australia, and they don't want to see anything like that come here. They've worked hard and got a life established for themselves. They're Casey residents. They're the type of people who, that's what Australia's about, wanting to find peace and just live it. But I think we've got a lot to learn from the migrants, what they've come from. They're going to be the ones we're going to allow to speak out too, and say, what could we set to lose? What could it turn into if we don't stand up and if we don't voice our concerns and say to the government, no, enough's enough. These restrictions are too harsh. Why don't you do this and the other? Why don't you stop looking after your buddies and your left-wing bastards, so to speak? Sorry, excuse the language, but instead of just creating, trying to blame families for all that's going on. Sorry, I don't want it just to be bagging Premier Andrew's night, but I'm just very angry about a few things, that's all. He also sacked me, by the way, so him and his cronies. So I'm a little bit quite annoyed by a few things.
You're giving a voice to the voiceless, which is a lot of, from tomorrow we're going to be in our homes, vast majority of Victorians just stewing and enraged that we're in this situation again, because this is not this is not when the virus came to Australia, and it was fair enough. We gave our governments the benefit of the doubt that they were playing catch up, but this is caused, this second wave, by Daniel Andrews. And I can't believe that they hired private security contractors and some of the dodgy practices, such as the ghost shifting and paying them cash in hand, sort of how that was allowed to happen. And of course, like a true communist, he blamed large family gatherings, anyone but his ministers. And of course, they've deferred to this independent inquiry, judicial inquiry, that will happen over the next 3 months to find out how this happened. And going back to you, were you as a councillor allowed to have a judicial inquiry before the council was sacked?
Do we ever get afforded fair process? I think I'll just tell you, I just think it's interesting. Look, there's so many ways to answer that. But I'd tell you, I know we'll probably touch on it later, Tim, but the safest place I felt to speak was when I was sitting in the IBAC chair, because he said nothing you say or do could be used against you in a court of law. I was always threatened that I couldn't speak, and it was just, that we weren't under parliamentary privilege. But it's just interesting. I've asked for fair process. I went to the radio came to me and I said, come on, allow any citizen in Australia should have fair process. But they railroaded us out of of power, and it backfired on them. And I think it's just a downhill spiral for the rest of them whoever resided over that, especially when their backyards are dirty. But judicial process always should have. There always should be some consideration for any time when we're dealing with serious matters like this. So, that's sort of a long way to answer your message, your question, Tim.
And also, I think what has also alarmed people about this second lockdown is the hard, we shouldn't call it hard lockdown, but imprisonment of those residents of those 9 public housing towers who, as Daniel Andrews was making the announcement, they didn't get no notice. Police were there forcing them to remain in their flats. They weren't allowed to go out for any reason. I've seen footage inside of them. Many of them are migrants who fled this type of suspension of their civil liberties. And I noticed on Twitter that Saturday evening a fracturing in what's termed the Cult of Dan. Cult of Dan I know it still has a lot of devotees who are saying, he's doing a great job under pressure, we should be supporting him at this time. But I saw, and especially a lot of the far left apologists, many of whom would have been at the Black Lives Matter rally, they turned on Daniel Andrews for basically imprisoning these vulnerable people who'd done nothing wrong other than that there was a virus in their building. And they were a lot of these people were marching for Black Lives Matter. What about the Black Lives Matter that, look at what you've done? Now Black lives are under house arrest and some of them have coronavirus.
That's an interesting connection. You're exactly right, Tim. Look, I've considered what's happening there, and I'm very compassionate for them. I used to work in a drug clinic in North Melbourne, one of my first jobs. So some of these residents may not be far from that location. I understand that it could be people from all walks of life they may be struggling, they may not be, they may just be in interim housing, migrants. We shouldn't apply a brushstroke to these guys that somehow we stereotype them as to be a certain group of people. They are people that deserve our compassion, that we need to show them proper care. And I'm really quite sad at what he's done. I suppose he's not, like I said, he's favours some groups and not others. I heard a rumour, Tim, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that there was that they want to take that land for other development. I don't know. So does that mean he wants to eventually get people out of that building? But yeah, it's quite sad. I don't know if there's a very easy answer to the whole thing. Perhaps even former Prime Minister John Howe might not have the answer, but I just know that there is people hurting out there, and we need to encourage the government to do the right thing. I think those, perhaps his former devotees, as you were saying, they're probably getting pressure from their electorate, not only about the lockdown, about what they're imprisoning these residents, that sort of thing. I certainly want to see us all be treated well, and no matter where you live. Would he be locking people up in Toorak? I don't know. I just
be locking anyone up.
Exactly right. Yeah. And having the freedom to come and go within boundaries. You know, some of them are not sick, so they shouldn't be forced quarantine. I think you said it before, Tim, about how China welded gates shut and houses shut. They couldn't even get in and out. Locked in there, they could end up dying in there, which is just an awful thought.
And there was reports today of a person in the tower threatening to jump. There was an escapee on Monday who bit a police officer, which of course they shouldn't have done that. But it just shows you that it is literally a prison, and
it's desperation.
Yeah, in Victoria now, we are trapped here, and we have had last week Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk said that she was going to instruct her Border Patrol to check trucks if they were smuggling in Victorians. And even New South Wales Police said that some Victorians, they might go through bushland or swim across the Murray to get to New South Wales.
Sounds like the Scarlet Pimpernel. Have you ever read that book?
Yeah,
they're trying to smuggle people in.
We are the Mexicans, basically. I won't use the actual term for crossing a river because YouTube will flag this, but there has been a flight, Victoria flight from Victoria to New South Wales. New South Wales Authority cracking down on Victorians trying to flee, and it just makes your head spin that this is Australia, Victoria, 2020, Melbourne, one of the world's most livable cities.
Yeah, yes, that's right.
And you mentioned about the towers. There might be an ulterior motive. Well, we know that Daniel Andrews doesn't have a history of transparency. If he was planning to do that, I hope that he would be open about that. But these buildings, they're very old. They're ugly, both on the outside and inside. I don't believe in the public housing at all. There's no need for it. And as we've seen now, if you're living at the government's leisure, they can they have the justification to lock you up. I very much admire what Margaret Thatcher did in the 80s by privatising the public housing, so that residents who formerly were living at the government's leisure now owned those properties. And when I was reminded of these towers, it reminded me of, because they do look unsafe. I don't know that for a fact, but they just don't look very livable. And it reminded me of that horrific Grenfell Tower fire in the UK a number of years back. That's right. We shouldn't have people living like that in Australia, and also confined like that as well. I think we've also appreciated during this pandemic that we've got all this. Australia's a large continent. We can spread out. There's nothing wrong with McMansions and urban sprawl. We need our space.
That's right. I mean, look, I know that there's a real move to put public housing in amongst estates. You know, when there's new estates that are built, that the government buys a certain amount of houses and they get used and they're sprinkled, so they assimilate properly into the community, be part of the community, not isolated. Now, I know these are, historic decisions that were made, and people do want to still live in the inner city, or perhaps they want to live to certain resources or certain services. But I think that there should be a move to move people to estates so that they do feel part of the community a bit more, and won't be so, ostracised. I put a post up on my Facebook and I was surprised at the mixed response. There was some very uncompassionate responses about these people, and I was a bit shocked, to be honest, and assuming. Look, I understand people's concerns at the same time, but we're all humans. What about the humanity? And we may have our differences. And Tim, I'm very opinionated. I'm very quite outspoken, but I still look to the heart of a person, that they are a fellow human being, and we've got to do the minimum just to ensure that we are looking after people's needs and essential services and that sort of thing. So that's what we should always aim for. I don't care who you are. I'll offer you a cup of coffee. I don't care where you come from. I might have a debate with you, might disagree with you, might not let you be my two right-hand man on something, so to speak. But yeah, sorry, I'm going off the topic a bit.
And we've seen how, and the thing about the lockdown of these towers, they need, it's supposedly because there's a virus sweeping through it. You're sending all these police into patrol, and apparently there's all these social workers and health professionals and that. And You're sending more people into this confined space, and we all remember what happened with the hotel quarantine. Those security guards went back and infected their families. And you just wonder, given that it is such a confined space, how can you guarantee that a police officer, a health professional, a social worker isn't going to get the virus from those towers and give it back to their family or where they reside?
That's right. I just don't know how they weren't properly trained about what the situation was. I mean, I look, they're now putting in air hostesses. Sorry, is that the right? Stewardesses, the right word? But which is probably they're a bit more understandable. Are they properly trained to deal with the quarantine issues? So I don't know that they have really thought this through, and they probably had to make quick decisions. But those security guards, oh my gosh, like they're probably bouncers at nightclubs, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's fantastic. My husband used to be a bouncer at a nightclub once upon a time. But I just think, they've got to be better, wiser counsel when it comes to making decisions we're dealing with health, we're dealing with affecting people's lives, and this has effect to the rest of the state and the country. I'm a little surprised about everything, to be honest.
We've all the communities have done the right thing. It's the governments who they said, trust us to handle this. It's them that made the stuff up. And well, if you have a look at the care packages that are sent to these towers, the food supplies, I mean, this just shows you government incompetence 101. They give them cereal without milk and spreads without bread. I mean, they don't even know what people buy at the supermarket. I just couldn't believe it. And it reminds me of, I'm going to bring in another Simpsons reference here. I'm not sure if you're a fan of the show, but when in the Halloween episode, the zombies are on the loose in Springfield, and the rest of the Simpsons family are barricading the house. And then Marge asks Homer, "Oh, Homer, did you remember to barricade the front door?" And he's like, "No, why?" "Oh, the zombies, no." And that basically, I think the rest of Victoria is basically COVID safe the state, and then they're basically saying, "Hey, Daniel Andrews, did you manage to stop the virus at the border?" "Oh, no."
Oh my goodness. Well, let's just say if they force us to have a vaccine, we might all turn into zombies. So I'll have to think of I wouldn't have thought of a zombie quote, but I'll have to think of something else, Tim. Like, dope. Is he going to say that, Premier Andrews? Oh, made another stuff up. Dope.
Oh, I think based on his former mate, Adem Somyurek, he'd be using a much more filthy language than that. And he was the one that sacked you. And it was only 2 or 3 weeks ago that 60 Minutes episode with the secret recordings of Somyurek. And it were obviously the most disturbing allegations are using taxpayer-funded staffers to branch stack for the Labor Party. But as we know from Daniel Andrews in the Labor Party in 2014, they're not with the red shirts rorts that they're not above doing that. And also the absolutely despicable way he spoke, because remember, Labor says that they care about feminism and victims of domestic violence and the LGBTQI community, and you have Adem Somyurek threatening saying that he wants to knock the block off the domestic violence minister, and calling young Labor members passive aggressive. I won't say the word, but people such as yourself and Pastor Nalia are called sexist and homophobic, and yet basically shows it's all a facade, and people like him, they don't really care about you. It's just about the game.
Oh, absolutely, grasp for power, and you wonder why they did it for themselves. Some of those, Mr. Somyurek, sound like he did. You know, and I was with a political party. We're no longer functioning at the moment. We're an advocacy group, but Rise Up Australia was one of the most diverse, one of the most balanced when it came to male versus female, young versus old, all sorts of colours, which were beautiful, migrants, Australians, Aboriginals, which are Australians, of course, but you're talking about a variety of people. We had the most diverse party, and we were the envy of people like, of members of the Labor Party. But yeah, I was a bit, I wouldn't say I was fully surprised, but I didn't know him very well. I didn't know him at all, actually. I only met him once at a project which was happening in the City of Casey, and didn't really know what to think about him. Just he was a minister, and so it is interesting. I had this sense at the time when I met him. I wonder if I wonder what will happen down the track. I don't know. It was this sort of I thought it might have been a positive thing, but it turned out to be quite negative. And so he did end up sacking us, and then he turned around and he was the one that was sacked in effect. So that's why I was saying there's a natural reaping and sowing that occurs. But I just thought it was interesting that he scoffed in his phone calls. Not only did he all those things that you said, which was what we get accused of, which was pathetic, but he also said, "Oh, I'm just waving my power around," or something like this. I'm sacking councils and doing this and that. And I'm thinking, this man, he's unbelievable. I mean, who does he think he is? Playing with people's lives like this. And I worked with a political party for 7 years. I know how difficult it is to keep a membership functioning, and there's a natural attrition rate and you get new members, and it is hard, but we never once branch stacked. We did it honestly, fairly. We were the subject of ridicule from some of these major parties, but we did it straight and clean. And I was on the front line. I was on the phones, and I was talking to members, gaining new members. Some needed to leave the party. That's fine. It happens. But I just know how hard it was. And you think all along, these bastards were doing it the hard way. They were doing it the false way. And I just think I'm so glad it got exposed. And, I just think there's more to come. And it's interesting when you think your enemies are coming after you, sometimes they turn their swords on each other, as the Bible says. So stick with God and trust in him, and he'll sort it out, But I think it's interesting what's happened. But I also am glad for the Australian people. They don't need this, but they need to also remember this at the next election. That don't just swallow. I'm just Ida Monaro. I don't know. Still voted Labor, and I just don't know. Maybe there wasn't branch stacking happening over that part of the country, but what is it? What is it going to wake people up that perhaps they can't vote for Labor? They can't do that. I think the Liberal Party's cleaning up. Hope to be part of them one day. So we'll see what happens down the track. But yeah.
Oh, I'm glad the Victorian Liberal Party, they're finally finding some voice and some spine. Michael O'Brien, he's going in hard.
Good.
Matthew
Good.
Guy, the previous leader, hardly anyone knew who he was or heard much from him. And Tim Smith, the shadow planning minister, is when he called Dan Andrews on Twitter a friendless loser and a lurch, hashtag Dan has no friends. That was one of the most epic tweets I'd ever seen from an Australian politician. And since then, he basically did the Trump approach. Don't back down, don't apologized, and he's embraced the name dictator or Chairman Dan, which he originally got from Bernie Finn, MLC, as well. And I noticed that even initially Michael O'Brien was a bit sort of he didn't like Tim Smith's strong language, but he doesn't mind now. And it's like, yeah, give it to them. And I'm glad I'm seeing the shadow ministers, police ministers, David Southwick on in the media quite a bit. Georgie Crosley, the shadow health minister, they're getting out there, and there's a whole constituents there, small business people who are getting punished again. And definitely there's a angry constituent. That's just one constituent there, but we have to wait until November 2022. And I saw Tim Smith looks like he's planning to bring back the guilty party campaign that Jeff Kennett used successfully in the 1992 state election, where It's almost like Victoria's in a time warp now. It's like 2020 is 1990 in Victoria, with the state of Victoria broke, destitute.
Well, absolutely. I don't know that a full negative campaign is a good idea, but we have to remind the public just about how bad this state has gotten socially. I mean, they're building things, that's great, but it's also sad that they're challenging our national security by selling out to China. So who's really funding all this construction anyway, which I'm concerned about. Look, I certainly hope that, and I'll say this with all due respect to everyone involved, but, the Labor Party also used to be a Labor Party for the people and for the worker and for, good, strong family values, godly values. I would like to see them come back to that too. I'm not typically Labor, but it was interesting. There was an analysis done on some of our votes where we drew votes from at Rise Up. We drew half of them from Liberal Party, half of them from Labor. So we were really in the centre a lot. And so I know that there is people that fundamentally want to see the Labor Party return to the values in which it established itself. So I want to see that for them too. And I think the likes of the Honourable Mr. Anthony Byrne too, that's what he was hoping to see as well, the party that he loves removed from corruption. So
local government elections are scheduled to take place in October this year. I'd say at this stage I will see about that because this is how the local government is set up in all state and territories, that the state government has the power to sack local governments and put in an administrator, but City of Casey won't get the chance to vote for you or any other candidates until, at this stage, 2024, the next election cycle. They put in an administrator, and it just seems how come a bureaucrat is so much more skilled and knows what the people want than the elected representatives. And I mentioned that all the councillors part-timers as well. The full-time the most highly paid person at the council is actually a bureaucrat, which is the chief executive, unelected, but is appointed by the council. It just seems to about local government that the elected people, they're working their day jobs and doing this part-time, but it's the bureaucrats who they're getting the full paycheck and running the show. That just doesn't seem like a good system.
Well, look, I think that people should be paid for what they deserve, what the skills that they bring as well. And I don't think that the administration should be paid any less. I do think they do bear the skills that they bring to the organisation. I saw some amazing operators. We had some management, executive management, and the CEO himself, both Mr. Tyler and I've drawn a blank on Mr. Glenn Patterson. Sorry, I've just drawn a blank on his name. They all operated very well, and didn't always agree, and there was some things that perhaps we all could do better, but councillors were taken for granted a lot of times, and so I think that you do have to pay more to get better quality too, because otherwise councillors are going to be distracted with full-time jobs so that they can continue to feed their family. I think that if they're going to revamp the system, they consider looking at focusing on the jobs being a full-time, not just the mayor, but the councillors. And there'll be should be some expectation linked to that. So we saw through the IBAC hearings that it was exposed that some councillors were busier than others, some working harder, but I think that lends itself more because they were needed to work full-time jobs. But I wanted to be out there more. I wanted to give more time, and I just couldn't, had to still work other job and do other commitments as well. So I think if they're going to revamp the system, they should look at that, but have a higher accountability for everyone involved, not just, but primarily for councillors. but not be able to sack them so easily. To be honest, it's really quite sad. There should be some safeguards in the system as well. And I think there will be a brand new day and a brand new world when it all happens, finishes. And I look forward to the people benefiting from a better system and better governance.
Well,
Absolutely.
we see with the system of government over in the United States, with the city mayor is full time. The buck stops with the mayor. A lot of the city councillors there full time, though that does lead to, as we've seen with the coronavirus pandemic over in the US, conflicts between mayors and governors, and then President Trump has disagreements with the governors as well. So it does come with weaknesses as well. But you only have to look at Queensland's local government system, which they held their local government elections at the height of the pandemic. They didn't suspend democracy at all, which I'm glad they didn't. There wasn't a single coronavirus case traced to a polling booth, but they have more. They amalgamated their councils about a decade ago, but the councillors are much more active. The local mayor, whether it's City of Brisbane, City of Logan, is much more a visible presence. The City of Brisbane, I would say, well, look at how Campbell Newman was able to leapfrog from Lord Mayor to Premier. Queensland, I would say, is the model where you have a much more visible council. There's more accountability, and it looks like the councillors and the mayor, they are running up more than bureaucrats.
Look, I think absolutely we should look at revising it. And I would say the first thing I would suggest too is that everyone is transparent about every cent that they get in for campaign donations, so that everything, like down to the last cent, or if you get any at all. And I think there should be some strict, like for instance, I know Premier Andrews, he didn't even put a tendering process out for the transurban. Some of the, I just think, who is he favouring? So I don't know. We don't know if they're campaign donors. Okay, maybe that I'm going too far. I apologise if I said anything I shouldn't have. But why don't we revamp this whole system and do away with most of the campaign donations, and you have a bit more fairer system? I think that, you know, you still have to be able to raise money to run, but it should be with a caveat that you never have anything to do with those people that give. They just give because they want to support the cause, but there should be never, you know, it's very hard because you still have to declare conflicts of interest. I did at times where, you know, you might have known your mum was in the street that they were making a decision on, or there was, you know, somewhere you used to be involved in an organisation or something. But Casey was sacked because of alleged corruption with, you know, donations. That would be one of the first things to look at. And I think it shouldn't just be Casey. This is sort of ground zero right here where I'm standing, sitting, but it's more that right across state and federal, it's time to clean up the whole, make it more transparent. And what is it that you're doing favours for? I was offered $25,000 once, you know, Tim, from a businessman, saying he'd fund my campaign. And I turned around to him and I said, you can't buy me. And I, you know, probably stuffed that chance of getting help from that person. But I just knew that if you offered money to someone that you barely knew, what were you wanting? But at the same time, people are still going to be able to raise money for a donation. Probably going too much about it, but I want to see that looked at. Transparency fully, absolutely. Accountability, absolutely. Greater work expectation, which wasn't occurring at council. Here at Casey, all you had to turn up was probably one in every 3 meetings if you felt like it. Sorry, I didn't want to sound disrespectful, but if you had to legislatively turn up to one in every 3, and then if you couldn't turn up to that third one, you just put in a leave of absence. So I know people had good reasons, or who knows what some of the reasons really were, but I want to see people own it. I cared about it, and I know a lot of them did for sure, but I want to see people who really want to be in here. I want to see people who would lay down their life for these residents, you know, the way I did. Sorry, my heartstring is stitched right here, So, yeah. Tim, why don't you run? Let's run together.
I've been in the political system at various times over the years. I think I'm done with that part of my life. I'm
You're not that old. Come on.
I'm very I would say comfortable
Content?
now being in as I call it, the information war, because
commentary,
the media has a lot of influence and sway over politicians and the decisions that they make, and can certainly warp the public's view. And that's why I do what I do, because there's mainstream media is putting fake news out more than ever now. You mentioned about the alleged super spreader in northwest Melbourne that Jenny McCarkos said. That sounds they call a lot of us conspiracy theorists. That sounds like quite an out there theory. they told us this virus was airborne, but no, it's transmitted by droplets, just like any other flu is. So it's important now more than ever that people they do their own research, look for other news sources to make up their own mind. Information in 2020 is the greatest weapon in making sure that your freedom and liberties are secure and that you have a prosperous future.
Yeah.
Just past 8 o'clock Melbourne time, less than 4 hours of freedom. I think I said at the beginning, I said 4.5. I should have said 5.5 hours. I got that mixed up at the beginning. Never mind.
Yeah.
But yes, the countdown is on. So I'll let you go now, because it is
okay.
It is literally it's not like a Bucks night where jocularly a last night of freedom. This is literally last night of freedom before we're all basically under house arrest and only allowed out at the discretion of the authorities. And you just really fear that, because the people, you get this time that people are not going to cop it, because they know who caused this second wave. You just wonder just how far Daniel Andrews, his ministers, Victoria Police are prepared to go to get us to obey. It's you get quite scared thinking about it.
Absolutely, but like I said, we've got to speak up. Not just a few of us, not just you and I, Tim, but people have got to send in petitions, write to their local members, write to Mr. Andrews himself, Premier Andrews, write to the federal ministers as well. We've got to let people know about how this is affecting our lives and how we want to see less draconian laws that are pressed upon us. We want to have freedom back tomorrow. And we just don't have lockdown the whole state. It doesn't make sense. There's enough room here. So, but thank you very much, Tim, for having me on. I really appreciate giving us the time. And look, at your role is very important, and I'm grateful to you and your commitment. And I just really hope that you keep with it. And thanks so much for giving us all a voice as well. So God bless you. And I just want to say to everyone out there, praying for you all. In fact, twice a day at least, I've been praying for everyone out there, and friends and family, and just wanting us to all get past this. But I know that we're going to get through it, and I don't know, we'll get through it together just now, or not being kept apart. But what I'll say is that just keep strong. Those of you feeling down and out, I encourage you to pray to God. Jesus is right there. And just ring a friend, just find something positive to do at home. There's things that cost a lot of money that you can do, and get involved in a craft, or whatever you can do to add. So you all.
Your internet is cutting out now, so
is it?
That's
okay.
probably the the best time to end it there. Thank you once again for coming on WilmsFront. All the best. Send my regards to you and your family, and
thank you, Tim. You too.
The wonderful business people and residents of the City of Casey.
Yes, absolutely. God bless you all, and we'll hopefully see you soon. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, that brings us to the end of this WilmsFront show. Just to remind, or to announce to everybody, I should say, that beginning from Monday next week, WilmsFront will continue twice a week on Monday and Wednesday evenings, but it will return to its original time, 7 p.m. Melbourne time, both on Monday and Wednesdays on the WilmsFront YouTube and DLive channel. Thank you, everybody, for watching tonight. Of course, I'll be back with the Uncockables tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time, on the Uncockables YouTube and DLive. We are back on the Uncockables YouTube channel now. We had the special Saturday show with the Edinburgh by-election. That was on the Unshackled channel, but we're back on the Uncockables channel tomorrow night. And then, of course, rounding out the week is Trad Tasman Talk, which is 6 p.m. Fridays Melbourne time. On the Unshackled YouTube channel. I'm sure Dewey will now laugh at us Victorians, since we're back into lockdown and New Zealand is back at alert level 1. That's it from me tonight. We'll continue to cover here at the Unshackled on WilmsFront how the second lockdown goes, and whether there will be more scrutiny on Daniel Andrews and his government's conduct, and whether the people will be as supportive as they were the first time around. So take care, stay safe, not just from the coronavirus, but from government tyranny as well. And I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting theunshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.